Okay, welcome here into my studio in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. My name is Michael Markowsky, and maybe you already know that because you were watching Monday's episode or class, and I'm glad to see you back here with us again today, and that you're going to continue your journey in learning a little bit about photography and taking your picture making skills to the next level, because we're surrounded by images. One of the things that I wanted to say last class, and there was a lot of things going on that I forgot to talk about, but I really did want to talk about the importance of taking pictures. We, there's something like, 5 million pictures every minute. In fact, I think that's actually a really low estimate, are uploaded to the web around the world constantly these days. So there are so many images flooding our lives constantly, and the majority of them really are average at best. Because I don't think most people really know how to take photographs. So I really applaud you for having the courage to explore a new skill and to join me today. And we will get better. You will get better if you follow some of the things that we're talking about. Okay, so last class, we ended up, I kind of gave you a little bit of an assignment suggesting that people go out and take some photographs at different angles. And most of the time when we're taking pictures, we take photographs standing up with our camera right up to our eye. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. It's just that everybody is doing that. So just by moving the camera down a little bit, even to kind of your torso, belly, or even if you go a little bit lower, will change your pictures dramatically. And then we're talking about getting right down, if you're taking photographs of children or animals, and how that's going to radically kind of change the way that we look at the people or those animals or objects in the frame of the picture. So speaking of which, usually when I'm teaching this class in person, people have sent me their images, and I've got a whole bunch of images that we put up on a screen, and then I critique them. And I don't think anybody sent me anything on Twitter. I'll just double check really quickly right now, and I don't see any new images here. So in lieu of that, instead what I'm going to do is, just about an hour and a half ago, I went out and I took some photographs on this this Fuji XT3, which I actually just bought for doing this live streaming. And so I just bought this off somebody on Craigslist about a week ago. Got a great deal. And there are actually a lot of, unfortunately, people are selling their gear because they need money. And so you can get some good deals from people who are looking to well, not everybody's desperate, but there's also a lot of people who are upgrading their equipment, that are sitting around on the couch and like, this old camera I want to get rid of, I want to buy something new, and now I got to get rid of this thing. So maybe I'll just kind of show, I'm just taking the SD card out, and I want to make sure the camera is off, And this is what I do every time I go out and take photographs. I take the card out, and I'm going to put it into the computer here, and I'm going to show you. This might be setting myself up for a disaster here to show you my images that I've just taken. They're fresh out of the camera. I haven't edited anything, and I'll show you a little bit about how I organize my photographs, and then how I don't think I'll do really any photo editing. That'll be for one of the later classes, but I think it's instructive for some people to see how a photographer organizes photographs. And I'll say that this is not the be-all and end-all only method of doing it. There are plenty of different ways that I've seen it, but this is just the way that I've done, because I take a lot of pictures and I need some way of organizing it, and this is the way that I've come upon it. So let me see, what's the best way to do this? It was just occurring to me that this would be something to do. Let's put that up here and put this here and put this here, save that, save. Okay, and I'm gonna just hide a few things that aren't relevant here. Okay, maybe I'll put this image, or this here, and okay. So I'm going to show you my setup here. So I just put the SD card into my camera, and here it is. It's popped up. This is actually a firmware update for the lens of the camera that I'm filming on, one of my Fuji cameras. So that's another thing too. You can with these new cameras, just like your phone, you can update the software in the camera and the lens periodically. The companies put out updates. So we'll just see. You can see here, I went out for an hour with my daughter and took photos, and I took 317 photos. So I took a lot of photographs, and that's there's just a quick tangent. I promise it'll be quick. Is that there's competing philosophies about this. Some people say, be very, very judicious with the photos you take, and take maybe, you go out for an hour, take 10 photographs and really work at composing the photographs. And then there's the other thing, is just to kind of shotgun, take tons and tons of stuff, and you're guaranteed to get something. I will say that this is it's not a brand new camera. This is a camera that's actually been out for almost 3 years now. And I've bought it used, and I haven't really used it at all. I've used it for some video, but not for photography yet. So I haven't really set it up. And when I got out there, I kind of panicked, thinking like, oh, maybe I should have, taken a little bit of time to set this up. So the photos, we'll see. I haven't really reviewed any of these photos, so this is going to be something for all of us here. So the first thing I'm going to do when I'm looking at my photographs is I'm just going to start organizing them. Before I even just start jumping in, I'm going to start organizing. So, okay, so here's a few photos I took, little samples when I first got the camera to make sure everything was okay. So I'm going to create some folders here. So the first folder would be test photos. Okay, and then, so here's a bunch of photos that I can, this is being a little cranky because I'm running it through the HDMI. It's like I'm got a lot of technology going on here, and it's a little bit stressful to have all of this running simultaneously. Okay, so then the next bunch of photos here, these are kind of the first setup I did with my daughter. She's super adorable. Let me see. Okay. So just so I can remember, I'm going to create another folder. This is for playground. And then number 3 here was grass. And then if I remember, I took a bunch of signs. So it's really helpful to do this. Oh, you can't even see what I'm doing. That's what am I? I've covered. Great. Okay. So this is easy to do when you get home and you can put it onto your computer. It's easy to do this now. This is much more difficult to do a week later, 6 months later, a month later. And most people shoot thousands and thousands and thousands of photographs on their SD card, never look at the images on there until they need to find something, and then they're up the creek because it takes them forever to find something. So here, finding so all of these images I'm going to dump into playground. Okay. And then all of these ones. So this I find just is super helpful to start. If I see a giant a folder just full of thousands of photographs, it for me is just like terrifying, because I don't even know where to start when it comes to editing all of those photographs. And then I think these were just everything else that I took on the walk back. Okay. And you know what I should have done actually is put all of these, I'm going to take these photos and I'm going to copy them onto my computer here. And I'll also, just while we're here, I'm just going to show you what I do for my sort of file system workflow. As you see, look, I've created a folder for every year, right? So, and I've backed all of these up. So we're in 2020. So here's folder, I'll just go back to it, 2020, open that folder, and then I've already got one started for May. Here we've got April, and I can go down to today's class, April 29th, right? It's just to make sure. It's April 29th. This is what the photos from this event, Photo Walk with Edie, that's my daughter's name. And then now I'm copying these photos into that folder off of my SD card. And then once all that's there, I'm going to erase the photos off my SD card, put my card back into my camera, so that if something happens while I'm in the middle of this, I can just run out the door with my camera and I'm ready to go. Oh, I keep moving this out of the way. So while that's copying, a couple more minutes here, I just want to... yeah, it's so hard to not take a lot of photographs. Yes, okay, sorry. The comments, move the screen out of the way, we can't see anything. So again, if you have questions, just like we did last class, every 15 minutes or so, I'm going to take a quick little glance at the screen and make sure the sound is still running, if you saw what happened at the very end of last episode. And then if there's larger questions, we'll save them to the end. I've had a few people over the past day ask me a lot of questions about buying a camera. So, and I've written some kind of lengthy emails about all of that, and I think all of that stuff is worth kind of sharing with people. I just trying to think of, I don't usually go into it in depth during the class because there's obviously lots of other things I want to talk about, but it is essentially the advice, which just a quick repeat of what I said yesterday, was that my personal recommendation, and I think any serious photographer would tell you, the DSLR ship is sinking. It's time to jump off before you're stuck with a whole bunch of equipment that is no longer useful for the mirrorless systems, which is the future. And it's really the present. That's where all the professional photographers are moving to. And really, once you experience using a mirrorless camera, using a DSLR feels like using some Stone Age tool. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why, but the main advantage for somebody just getting into photography is that when I turn my camera on and I start turning the dials on the camera, I can see in real time the changes and so if I point my camera at something and it looks too bright or too dark, I know that the picture will be too bright or too dark, and I can make changes immediately. That sounds like obvious, but with a DSLR, it doesn't work that way. You're looking through an optical viewfinder, so you're seeing what the lens sees, and it could look great, and then you take the picture and everything's too dark or blurry, and it's like, why did that happen? It looked really great through here. So again, go mirrorless. That's where all of the companies are moving. In fact, the high-end products by Canon and Nikon, I think this is the final year that they're releasing DSLRs for like the high-end professionals, and everything else is moving mirrorless. So let's go back to the files here, and so I've copied everything in here. What I like to do is I just want to make sure that my photos are in here before I do any deleting. If this was something really important, if this was an event that I had taken photographs or for some corporate event or a wedding, I wouldn't delete these photographs. I have hundreds of not hundreds but dozens of other SD cards. So I would finish the whole project, and then once that project's done, I would then erase that SD card. But for I think most of you, we can get rid of these files. So I'm going to delete those, empty the trash, boom, and now I've got a nice clean SD card. I'm just going to delete that or eject it from my computer, and then I'm going to put it back into the camera. So this is really important to do because I know most people take tons of photographs. They never take their card out of their camera, put it in the computer, and download the photos, and then what happens is the camera gets stolen or the SD card breaks, and then you've lost maybe a year or more of photographs that you can't recover. Because these SD cards, one has happened to me, and it was luckily that it was kind of in this scenario where I only had a few photographs on there, and it wasn't important photographs that I lost. Okay, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna show you this first scenario that I was, my daughter and I, we went for this walk, as I said. Oh, why is that not going full screen here? So we went to a local park just down the street from us, and I wanted to document this experience of being in the park. And because this is, because this whole situation that we see here is something that, knock on wood, we may never experience ever again, right? We hopefully will never have a situation again in which the park's playground equipment is closed to children, and the shelves at the grocery store are emptying, and all this kind of craziness that's happening right now. So it's like, I want to go outside and take some photographs that my daughter can, I made the analogy last class of, 20 years from now, she's going to be in a classroom, or maybe 15 years from now, and they're going to be doing a project. What did your family do during the quarantine outbreak situation? And I'll be able to give her some photographs just like this. So this is me setting this whole scenario up. You know, put my daughter down here on a blanket in the playground, and I loved all this. Everything's roped off, and you can see this sign here in the background. The playground's temporarily closed. So, and you can see my underwear. And so this is what I'm using for these photographs. This is my Fujifilm XT3, and this is the kit lens that comes with most Fuji cameras. This is the 18 to 55 millimeter lens, and this is probably the same type of lens that you get, you know, with your Canon camera. Here's the same 18 to 55 millimeter lens. Most cameras, when you buy them, come with that lens. Nowadays, when I'm buying a new camera, I often just buy the body only, which means it comes without a lens because I've already got lenses. I don't need another lens. So I also wanted to do this exercise with this lens, even though I've got some really beautiful, expensive lenses, because those lenses make taking photographs, really nice photographs, really easy. So a few things that you can just see here, and I'll show you these photographs in a moment. What I'm doing here is I'm actually quite close, and for most of these, the photographs you're seeing right now, I'm at the 18 millimeter setting, which maybe I'll just, while that's going on, how can I, let's see, I'm gonna bring up another picture. I'll put this down here, and oops, let's bring that up there, and this here. Okay, I'm just going to show you a slightly different angle. So to know what your focal length is usually on the top of your lens. You're going to see these kind of little numbers that say 18 to 55. When I'm at 18, means I'm zoomed out. I can see lots of things. When I turn this and I go to 55, I'm zooming into something. So for the most part, I'm zoomed all the way out, but like I was saying last class, I'm walking with my feet and getting closer, right? So for some people, standing this close to another person to take a photograph seems a little bit awkward, right? I wouldn't want to do this if I was a street photographer and I see somebody wearing some interesting outfit. It'd be really weird to get, you know, within arm's length of somebody to take their photograph. But if you're taking photographs of your family, then this works quite well. So a few things, as you'll see here, I think you're going to see, her shoes were falling off, and that was kind of troublesome. And then here what I did is I turned her a little bit so that I could get a different angle in these photos. So, and you'll see these photos shortly, and she's reaching out trying to grab the camera. Okay. I'm glad my underwear didn't, sometimes I have a little problem with crack coming out of the underwear. I don't, there's no delicate way of putting that, I guess. Okay. So let's take a look at these images here, and how many. I've got 140. And actually, what I'm going to do, I don't know if this is of interest to anybody at all, but I'm just going to enlarge these, because even before I start editing some photos or even looking through these, come on, what's going on? I'm just going to delete, if there's anything in here that is just not even worth considering, I'm going to delete that. So there was a couple photographs that were way overexposed, boom, gone, out of the conversation. I don't need to worry about them anymore. Sometimes there's a lot of them, and sometimes there's just those few. Do I want to open 138 pictures? Yes. And I'm going to cross my fingers that I don't crash my computer. Well, not that it crashed, but it could slow down this whole system. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do here, I'm just going to move this to the side so that I can kind of see these images. And if there's anything particularly interesting, I'm going to put a little star next to that image. Now, there are ways to do this using other software, like Lightroom, you may have heard of. I'm doing this kind of more basic system because most people don't have Lightroom. If you're watching this video, it's pretty unlikely that you even have heard of Lightroom, right? So I'm not going to use software that you don't have or you've never heard of. But Lightroom is a kind of software that you can use to organize your photos. So here's a bunch of photos. Okay, this is one that I kind of like, so I'm just gonna, so I add, you could use a notepad to write down numbers. In fact, I'm just gonna make this a little bit smaller. So that's 62. I'm not gonna go through all of these here. I'm just showing you kind of what my process is. So I'm going through here. 68. So yeah, if it's easier just to kind of have a little notepad and then to write down notes. Oh, here, let me change this to here. Rather than starring, you know, I can't remember how you would do this on a PC. So it's fairly easy. I have a pretty big monitor, so I can see when things are in focus pretty clearly and pretty quickly. If you're not able to do that, you know, if you're taking pictures and you have an older computer, opening all these photographs at one time could be difficult and demanding on your computer, and it could slow it down. So you may want to do them in smaller batches, like 10 or 15 photos at a time, as opposed to, I said, 130. Some of these are a little bit darker. Again, I was using this camera really for the first time. This level of darkness in an image isn't too concerning. This is something I can salvage relatively easy later on, as in terms of editing with the free software that comes in fact, let's just do I want to do a quick edit? No, that's for another class. We just want to get some of these photos in. You know, I'm looking at this. I like this photograph, but my daughter's hand is a little bit blurry here, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it sometimes having a movement like that could be really nice because it shows like action and but in this case, okay, and then her shoes were falling off, so that was driving me nuts, and I thought it started to look kind of strange. Oh, that's cool. I like this one. So, you know, the focus is a little bit off here, but I don't mind that so much. Okay, so this just gives you a quick idea. We're going to go through. You can see she gets really interested in the camera when I'm that close, so she wants to grab it. You know, so we have a number of these photos. Like the paparazzi is right in her face there. So again, what I liked when she's looking in this direction, right? You could see my cursor here. When she's looking this way, I liked having this sign in the background because it's almost like she's looking at this sign a little bit, right? I think she started looking the other way, and I was thinking to myself, just in terms of storytelling, which we're going to talk about shortly here, it kind of to me felt like, well, there's two ways to think about it. I might as well start talking about it using my own photos here, is that we look for stories in every single image. Whenever whenever you see a picture in the newspaper or on somebody's Instagram, there is a story there. Whether you're aware of it or not, people are telling stories through images, whether that's drawings or paintings, photographs, etc. So what is the story you want to tell, right? And it's not always, sometimes I ask that, people are like, I don't know, I just want to take a photograph of my dog. I don't know what, but do you want to present the dog in the best light possible? Do you want to show your happy dog and the fun that you guys have together? Or do you want to document, maybe your dog is not feeling well and you want to be able to, take a photograph and send it to your veterinarian right now because you don't want to take them there unnecessarily during this kind of climate. So, or maybe you have your dog is being really bad and you want to take a photo and send it to your partner to say, like, look what the dog did, it got into the cereal or whatever, right? So we're always looking for stories and images, whether we know it or not. So what is the story you want to tell? So in this series of images, what I want to tell is like how we're not able to, during this kind of crisis, we're not able to do what we would normally do, which would be to go to the park and play on all this equipment. It's all taped off and roped off. So I wanted some of this stuff to be in the image. So in the video I was playing earlier, sorry, I'll switch back to this angle. You can see I turned my daughter a little bit so that this was now on her left side or my right side, and just to try a different angle, right? I was saying this last time, is don't just be satisfied with that one shot, move your she's gonna kill me 20 years from now. This is all fodder for her therapist. And you see that things are getting brighter and darker and the background's coming into focus and out of focus. We'll talk about how I did that in a future on, I think, Monday's class. Yeah, in the next class, we'll start talking about how all of this happens. So this will be, I'll edit some of these photos down so you don't see all of them. You can see I accidentally kind of focused on the background instead of my daughter. So here's just a bunch of different photos playing around. So what I would suggest, this is a great exercise for you to do with your own family. These signs and stuff aren't, knock on wood, are not going to be up forever, right? So you should go out there and document them for your family. You have a responsibility to your family, to your descendants, your great-grandchildren. I have family that my grandfather had polio, right? I don't think there's any photographs of that experience, right? Like what, him laying in, an iron lung or whatever, was probably not, they were like, oh, this would be a bad photograph, we don't want to show our children, but decades later, that stuff would be like really powerful to be able to communicate that to, I'd love to be able to show a photo like that to our daughter and say, like, this is what life was like, your grandfather almost died, and if your grandfather had died, like, we wouldn't be here. Okay, so let's I'm gonna transition. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how I take some photographs, and you could see the changing some angles. I'm not gonna go into it, but I also took some photographs from above that didn't work out at all. Maybe it's, I think those are, I'll just go to, I think they're some of the very last ones I did. So that's actually, I'm going to bring these up just really quickly. While I'm talking about it, since we're right here. So you can see I stood up and I tried taking photographs of her from this angle. They're not the best photographs, they're kind of dark. But a few things happened. It was really hard to get her attention from this angle, right? She's looking here. This is not a comfortable angle for somebody to be. Like, this would, if there was some giant standing over me, like looking up at them is not, makes your neck sore. So I'd be like, I'm moving my arms trying to get her to look up at me, and she, and then when she finally does, she's looking into the sky and it's overcast, so really bright, so her face is all distorted, and she's like trying to, so no good photos are coming out of that process. So it's just a reminder to get down onto their level. You saw in the video where I was before. Okay, so what, I'm just going to check the comments here. Okay, nothing, nobody has any cute, yes, we have an adorable daughter. We are super, super blessed. What I want you to do while I'm at this point in the class, what I want you to do is grab a pencil and a piece of paper, because we're going to do a little bit of an exercise that is going to lead into the assignment that I would like for you to do over the weekend. So if you have a piece of paper and a pencil, grab that right now. I'm going to, let me see, these modes. Let's, I'm going to, let's, bring this. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about here is composition. So this is a really, really important part of photography and all image making, is how do you frame something? Most of us are using our camera in the auto mode on our camera. And just as a quick, when I say the auto mode, what are you talking about? That is the dial on your camera that is, let's, do I have another one from above? So this, like on the screen is your mode dial, right? And you can turn this to change the mode of your camera, right? And so most cameras have some kind of mode dial like this. The Fuji, which is the system that I use now, does not, well, actually this does have a mode dial. I was going to say I have the one of the cameras filming me right now is the XT3, which does not have a mode dial, but that's because it's like a really high-end professional grade camera. So as you go up in the quality of cameras, these mode dials disappear because professional photographers don't use any mode but manual mode. Okay, so your mode dial, we talked last class about setting it not to the fully auto with the green, but to the one right next to it, making sure everybody sees this here, the one with the lightning bolt crossed out, right? That one does everything the auto does but disables the flash. If nothing else, if you do nothing else, keep your camera on that mode. That is really, really important. Okay, so we're going to skip over what all those different modes do. We'll start talking about that next class. Because you can do everything we're about to talk about using even your iPhone, composition. So there's two sort of main structured ways of dealing with composition. One you may have heard called the golden ratio, and another one called the rule of thirds. They are not the same thing, but they are often used interchangeably, and while that probably frustrates some people, for the most part, and for probably your purposes, knowing the difference is not important. The main thing, if I could break down this whole concept down into its most simple, straightforward concept is this idea of decentering a picture or making asymmetrical compositions. So most people, when they're taking photographs, they take their camera and they see a beautiful flower and go, boom, I'm going to put the flower right in the middle and take a picture of it. And it looks pretty darn good, and it might be a beautiful photograph. But if we think about telling stories with our picture, we want there to not just people go like, that's a beautiful photograph, but to get sucked into the picture and to not only look at the flower, but some of the things around the flower. And this kind of movement, circular kind of moving or looking around the picture, as one might do if you go to a museum and you're looking at paintings, and here's some character, you know, I don't know, what's a famous painting off the top of my head? Like Van Gogh's Starry Night, right? So you see on one side there's this big tree, and as we look, so that might be the first thing we see. It's in the front of the composition, and then we move into the sky, which is swirling, and then we come down and look at the little village in the bottom, and then back up into the tree, and then we're just like sucked in endlessly into this picture. That's what we want people to do when they look at our photographs, is to get, you know, sucked right in, in a visual, emotional way as well. And to do that, we put things a little bit off the center. And in the rule of thirds, like you see on the screen here, we, instead of taking the photograph of this tree and putting it right in the middle, we're shifting it to 1/3 of the picture, right? So if you imagine your camera being divided up like this, and in fact, most new cameras have a setting within the menu that will allow you to bring this grid actually up on your screen. So as you're pointing your camera at something, you can see that grid on screen. And so the idea is, instead of putting your, I'm just going to blow this up even bigger here. So instead of putting the horizon, you know, where the sky meets the ground, right in the middle, and the tree right in the middle, we're taking the ground and moving it down to the lower third, and moving the tree over to the far right third, right? And so it's intersecting with these points. So that means that now we look at this tree, and then our eye moves into the sky, and then into the background, into the mountain, and comes back up when we get sucked into this picture like that, right? So we don't just see, oh, that's a cool picture of a tree, and then just start walking off. You're like, oh, that's a cool picture of it. Wow, look at that mountain, look at that sky. So if you take photographs, and I'm going to encourage you to do this, if you take photographs this way, what it does is it forces you to make a creative decision. It's forcing you to say, if you're looking at you know, a landscape, you know, okay, the sky is beautiful and the ground is beautiful, but I am an artist, and I am going to make a choice to focus my attention and ultimately the viewer's attention on one over the other. So I'm either going to point my camera up a little bit more so that I see more of the sky, let's say 2/3 sky, and 1/3 ground, or I'm going to move the camera down so I see maybe a little sliver of the sky on the top third and 2/3 of the ground below. So the sky on the top and then the ground below. And because maybe there's something really interesting in the grass, you know, or in the water, or, you know, I could go on and on. So it's, rather than sitting on the fence and saying, I like everything is really pretty here, you're saying, no, yes, everything is pretty here, but I want people to focus their attention on ... right? So moving things off to the side, and I will say that the caveat and all of that is that there are a number of photographers, painters, filmmakers, Wes Anderson being probably the most famous filmmaker who makes super symmetrical compositions in his films, like The Royal Tannenbaums and Rushmore and Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. If you see those films, everything takes place, the camera's always right in the middle. And because he does that, his images look really, really distinct and unusual, because they're different than everybody else's. So you could do the same thing, but if you're going to make very symmetrical pictures, you're doing it deliberately, not just by accident, but you're doing it because you're making a creative choice. And that's the difference between an artist and just some hobbyist or amateur who doesn't know what they're doing, right? When you start making some creative decisions to change the composition, you become an artist. You start thinking like an artist and start thinking like a photographer. Okay, so we're going to look quickly here at the golden ratio, which is very similar. And I'm not going to go into I think I scrolled up. If you want to go back and pause it and read all the text, you want to go down a rabbit hole on the internet, start looking up the golden ratio. You know, you'll fall into the Knights Templar and the Masons, and you're gonna start wearing tinfoil hats. But so if you just think if you look at the image I've got on the screen here. So again, we've decentered the composition. It's asymmetrical, and we have this woman walking, through the snow here, and in behind her are these trees. We see the horizon has been is at the top third of the picture, right? So this photographer is saying, you know what, the sky is beautiful, but it's all just one big whiteout, right? I can't really see any clouds or anything in there. But the ground that she's standing in, that is really kind of beautiful, right? So the photographer is focusing our attention on the bottom here. And she's also moved our attention, the subject, this woman here, off to 1/3, off to this side. And it works really well because sorry, I'm pointing at the screen. So this woman is looking towards that empty space in the picture, right? All of this empty space is being occupied by her attention. When we look at photographs, we always look at it, and if there's a person in the picture, our eyes go right to their eyes, and we look at their eyes, and we want to see they're in focus. That's the first and most important thing. If they're in focus, and then what is the person in the picture looking at? So if we're looking at that picture, we look at their face, and then we look at what they're looking at, because we want to see, can we see what they're looking at in the photograph? And so this, is like it creates the effect of this woman looking into this empty space, and maybe she's filling it with her hopes and dreams and ambitions, her plans for the future, right? So this makes it for a very hopeful picture. You could do the same thing with like a child looking up into the sky, and we see this big empty blue sky, right? And that makes us think like, oh, this child thinking about the future and what they're going to do, right? So that works really well. Now imagine if, for instance, instead of her looking this way into the empty space, we kept her in the same place, but had her looking into this area of the picture, right? If she was looking into this area, the picture would change, the story would change completely, right? All of a sudden, instead of her, imagining the positive places of the future, we might have a very different story. Now, one of the stories could be, depending on the expression on her face, like, wow, look at, this is the long road that I've walked to get here, right? This is my past that I'm leaving behind, right? Or we might, as a viewer, if she had maybe an anxious expression on her face, we might start thinking, oh, I wonder what's behind her. Is there a grizzly bear or a mountain lion, or like in a horror movie, a serial killer with a mask, about to jump out behind the bush, right? You could see that handheld look in film. So, because this is this empty space that is sort of behind her, that her attention is not occupying. Okay, so that's a super quick version of golden ratio and the golden mean. So decentering your pictures. So one of the tasks I'm going to ask you to do over the course of the weekend is to experiment with this. Whether you're taking a picture of a bowl of fruit or an action figure you have at home or your children, whatever it is, a tree or whatever, try just moving it off to one of the sides and moving the horizon up or down. That is all. If nothing else, again, if you can do that, you're going to start noticing some changes in your photos because it forces you to think creatively. Okay, no new comments here. Means audio still running fine. Okay, so here's some photo tips we talked about last week. I think what I want to do is I'm going to talk about, I think I've got 10 more. I think what we'll do, we're going to do 5 more of these photo tips, and we're going to save 5 more for next class. And, oops, I'm going to move this off to the side. I'm just going to hide that because we're just getting in the way. So I'm going to talk about these 5 tips, and then I'm going to give you an exercise to do, and then that'll be the end of class. So we should be done here in about 15 minutes or so. Just so if you're thinking of how much longer is this guy going to talk for. So here, another really important thing to do when you're taking photographs is often where we're trying to find the big picture, right? We want to take a photograph of all of the friends at the party who were there. But often the most meaningful pictures are the details, the close-ups. So even if you look at the pictures on the screen here, pictures of hands. On the left we have grandma's hands with a little baby, right? That tells you we don't have anybody's face in there, because often people feel really self-conscious about having their photo taken. So if you say, don't worry, I'm not going to take a picture of your face, I want to take a picture of your hands, most people feel less self-conscious of their hands than they do of their face. So they might be, oh, well, I don't mind you taking a picture of my hands, maybe I haven't got my nails done in a while, whatever, but that's okay. But this tells us, everything we need to know about this generational span, the cycle of life. Here we have a couple holding hands walking through, garden. This is the kind of picture people send on their wedding thank you cards to all the guests that came. And all the guests that were there, they already know what you look like, but this, immediately hits your heart and says like, oh, wow, that's so beautiful. Like them walking off into the sunset together. Okay, so looking for details when you take pictures. So don't be afraid to get close up to things. The next thing here is looking for frames within the picture. This is a great technique to catapult your photography to the next level. So for instance, if you start looking around at photos of musicians and bands, you are going to see like 40% of all photos of musicians, like when they're not on stage, but they're like posed photographs for an album or publicity, have them sitting on a windowsill or in a doorway, because it's a great device to kind of focus the viewer's attention, right? This is these people with the kind of the world beyond them, you know, like it's just visually really dynamic. You know, here we look at this picture of like a castle with the stockades that, you know, criminals would have been, you know, put into the blocks and people throwing tomatoes at them. So this photograph, we accomplished two things at once. We see this beautiful castle, and then we see, you know, this kind of darker kind of image in the foreground that tells us, like, you know, that's where the king is. This is where the people who the king doesn't like go, right? So we have two stories in one picture, right? Using your hands in pictures. There's a lot of people, you can take a really great, I don't have a mirror. I thought I had a mirror around here. I'll find it. Oh, here's, you know, for instance, you know, like a little compact mirror. If you took this and put it, let me see, I'm just gonna, you know, this mirror just, how can you can see my face in here eventually, right? So if I took that picture, I would see not only the table and the camera, but my own face reflected in the camera, or, you know, whatever else. So again, you have two scenes in one picture. And then this, lastly, before I move on from this, is, you know, the moon framed by plants. You know, often I see, like here I live in Vancouver, and people go down to the shore where the water is, and they see something on the other side of the shore, and so they kind of zoom in and take that photograph. And it might be a good photograph, but it doesn't really, it's like that photo could have been taken on a boat, it could have been taken on a float plane that just landed, it could be from a canoe, it could be from somebody standing on the other side. Where on the other side? We don't know. All we know is this, what's happening on the other side of the shore. So, oops, let's come back here. So, sorry about that. So, if you instead back up and take a photograph of some of the plants that might be surrounding, you know, right next to you, or the bike rack, or the signpost, or something around it that tells us where you are when you're taking that photograph. Again, you're compressing two ideas into one picture, and you're telling a more complex, more detailed story. This one is, don't be afraid to direct people when you're taking a photograph. So, like you saw earlier at the beginning of the video with my daughter, you know, I'm talking to her, I'm asking her to look at me, or I'm saying look over this way, I'm literally positioning her. I take off her shoe, which is looking a little bit awkward. I take the toys out that she's in her mouth and is distracting her. All of those things is I'm controlling the scene and trying to help make a better picture. And that can feel a little bit intimidating if you're a new photographer, to tell other people what to do. But it does, if you get a little bit of experience doing it, it gives people confidence that you know what you're doing, even if you don't really know what you're doing. But, you know, if you're taking a picture of people at a New Year's party and everybody's got, you know, a beer in a hand and a cigarette in a hand, and somebody's wearing sunglasses, and you know, but this is for the office, you know, the year-end review. You know, later on the next day when people sober up, they're like, oh, I don't know if I want that picture of me with, you know, the mustard stain or whatever on my jacket. I wish the photographer had just said, like, you know, put your scarf over, like, ugh, I'm so embarrassed, right? Your job as a photographer is to make the people in the images look good, right? You don't want to, like, you're not going to get hired back for a job if you produce pictures that embarrass people, right? That is not, no one wants to have a bad picture of themselves floating around on the web or whatever, right? So, you want, if there's something like whenever I'm taking a picture, I see somebody's wearing sunglasses, like, would you mind taking those sunglasses off, or you're raising your baseball cap, or taking that off altogether, or maybe just stand this way or turn this way, or there's some light coming on your eye, just move a little bit. So or put your beer glass down, or let's move that plant out of the way, or how about everybody move to the side so the light is a little bit better. All those kind of things tell people when they're getting their photograph taken, like, oh, this person has some idea of what they want and they want to get it. I want to help this person take a good photograph. Okay. This next thing here is, as you start taking more photographs, you start becoming more interested in light. And you want to, let me see, goldenhour.com here. Where's that? Going to actually bring up this website here. So, and one of the best time of the day to take photographs is when what we call the golden hour. And there's a golden hour in the morning and there's a golden hour at night. And so this is telling us from Mississauga, Ontario. I'm going to scroll down here. Do they not? I thought they had a Vancouver. Oh, here's Vancouver. This is where I am. So today, so this tells us today the golden hour is at 7. I always forget how to read this. What do they call this 24-hour clock? 1944 is 7:44, right? So that means during this time, oops, right here, from 7:45 to around 8:30 is golden hour here in Vancouver today, right? In the evening. In the morning too, there's also a golden hour. As the sun rises, there's also a golden hour. And that was this morning at 5:51 a.m. and ended at 6:36 a.m. Right, so again, I think you can see that web address, golden-hour.com, right? So you can pull this up on your phone. This just, okay, so why am I showing this? What is the golden hour? The golden hour is that period as the sun is rising and the sun is setting, when the sun is kind of at a very low angle to the earth, and the light has to travel through a lot of atmosphere, and that is making the light very orangey, yellowish, which is super flattering to people and to, well, anything really. Everything looks good with a little bit of warm light on it. So that's why now that you know this, just take a, well, I was going to, things are a little bit different now, but when things get back to normal, and you know when the golden hour is now, if you're walking around in a park, you will see photographers with brides and grooms, or people getting their engagement photos taken, because it's the best time for taking photographs that are going to look really flattering, that people are going to print and put on their wall. The worst time for taking photographs outside is in the middle of the day at 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun is directly above, because it's really harsh shadows, really bright, cool light, bluish light, which is not flattering to people's faces. So I think the next slide on here, the last one I'll show right now, is these, like, so you can see this bright light coming down onto somebody's face, this shadow of her nose on her lips, this person straining to see into the sun, trying to smile. It's just not a pleasant experience for the person you're taking a photograph of, and it's a really difficult time to take photographs if you're a photographer, because you now have super high contrast color, or super high contrasts of light and dark, right? So now you have super strong shadows and really bright light, which is often the most challenging time for photographers. And we'll talk about that on the last class. We talk a lot about that particular kind of situation. Yeah, okay. So I asked everybody to get out a pencil and paper. Did I just close that? I want to get that folder back out here. Nope, I don't want that either. Let's get preview back up here. It's going to open most recent. Okay. So I asked everybody to get your paper and pencils out because I want to do a little bit of an exercise, and this is going to be your assignment for the weekend. We're going to look at some images. Oops. I'm going to bring this back down here. So there are essentially 3 types of photographs, and I say essentially because there are more. We could really get into detail, but for our purposes, the main 3 types of photographs are what we would call an establishing shot. So a photograph that establishes where we are, right? So if we're going to tell a story, we need to establish where the story takes place. So here we have an establishing shot. Here's a market with people milling around in the market. So we see lots of people. People are small. We see architecture, landscape. The next photograph is what we call the medium shot. And now we're kind of narrowing in. So a medium shot is somewhere between, we usually see most of a person's body. We might kind of cut off around the knees or at the waist, but you see most of a person's body. And you may see 2 or 3 people in here. And then the final one would be a close-up shot. And then there's extreme close-ups and all this kind of stuff. But the close-up shot, so in this story we have, the market, right? And then we're going to close in on this one guy here who's buying or serving some food. And then here is what he's putting into that bag, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to, over this weekend, is to make 3 photographs. Tell me a story and 3 photographs, or you could think of it as a triptych. So the 3-picture story. Here's some examples of a 3-picture story. Let's scroll that up. We're going on a trip. Here's an airplane flying through the sky. Here's celebrating with friends, and then maybe going for a hike after you've eaten or something to burn off the calories. Here's another example. You go to France. So here's the Eiffel Tower. You're walking around with a baguette, right? And then you spend all your money, so all you have left is a can of beans, right? So we can kind of tell this story in a few short images. And one of the assignments when I'm teaching at Emily Carr is I get people to take a film and break it down into 3 or 9 or 12 images, just like you would see if you were looking at somebody's Instagram page. So this here is Star Wars A New Hope, the one from the 70s. This is something I created here. This is if I was trying to tell this story in the 12 most important images for this film. Right, here's how it begins. The princess gets captured, and then Luke Skywalker finds the robots, starts training, meets Han Solo. Han Solo and Chewbacca, they fly into the Death Star, fight Darth Vader, the Death Star explodes, and then they're celebrated as heroes. Right, so you can tell the whole story in just a few images. We're not going to go that complicated. We're going to go back to this 3-story idea. And I'm going to bring up, let me see, picture, here, and then here. And I'm going to draw this along with you. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and I've got some paper that I can use for making some sketches. I'm going to go to a blank page. These are some drawings from the drawing class that I taught yesterday. So you've got your sketchbook. What I would encourage you to do is I really think this is a very important exercise. So what I would do is, it's sort of like making a comic book strip for yourself. All right, we divide it into 3. And what I want you to do is imagine a possible story that you could tell in these 3 images. It is much easier to do a little bit of thinking about a story you want to tell, write some ideas down, and then when you take your camera and go out somewhere, you've already got a plan, right? So, whereas if you, oops, sorry, it's the wrong scene here. So I drew this out onto, maybe I'll even make that bigger here. Okay, so it's sort of like a Sunday morning cartoons, right? So a possible story that we could have, and is something to do with like life under quarantine, right? So maybe you have a photo of, and I'm just going to do these, and I want you to do this you can write it down. So let's say this is life under quarantine. You don't have to be intimidated about drawing. It's not about making a really pretty drawing, but let's say one of them is your fridge being empty, right? And you write empty fridge. And then the next one here is maybe you go to the grocery store and then we see, empty shelves. And then the last part of the story might be, maybe it's a, this is super dark. Let's say an empty bowl of food or something, right? So that's just, I'm making this up off the top of my head, so you got to excuse the quality of the concepts here. So that's one kind of a story. Let's say another one might be, you're gonna, like, before and after, right? So you have a before, after. Let's say you have a dog. You have your dog, and its tongue is sticking out, and it wants to go for a walk, right? It's sitting inside the house, and it's going nuts, and maybe there's papers and stuff all over the floor. It's tearing the house up. So then you take your dog for a walk, and maybe this is your hand holding a leash, and then your dog, I'm just trying to think of how it's the easiest way to draw this. Your dog, this is supposed to be a hand, it looks like a foot. Your dog running ahead on the street, right? And then afterwards we have a picture of your dog asleep on the couch or something, right? So, dog that is losing its mind, you take the dog for a walk and it's sleeping, right? Super simple story. There's a lot of people going for walks and trying to get out of the house these days. Okay, and we're going to wrap up here in about 2 or 3 minutes. If there's any comments that you have, I want you to put them in there, and I'll get to them as we finish here. So And I want you to do these drawings. Usually when we do this in class, this is what we do for the last like 10 minutes of class. I put up, you know, I have the dry erase board and I'm drawing, and I ask people, I pass out paper, pencil, write down, and some people are like, oh, guys, can't draw, or I don't know, I don't have any ideas. And you know what? Those are the people that don't do the project, because, you know, the night before, like, I don't know what to do. If you dump out some ideas onto the page, it's so much easier to actually do it, because now you've got a bit of a plan, right? So I strongly encourage you to just make some quick little sketches. Nobody has to see these things. Like, you can tear it up and hide it afterwards, and it'll never exist. No one will ever know about the quality of your drawing. Although you could take my drawing class and learn how to draw. Class number 2 is tomorrow, same time, same place. Class number 1 is already up there on YouTube somewhere on my channel, and you could watch that. So another one could be, let's say, again, another before or after. Excuse my writing. So let's say we have a simple bowl of fruit, you know, banana, next to the window, and we see the sun rising. We'll just do this 3 times here. We see this, take the photo in the middle of the day, and then sunset. Maybe they could be at golden hour. You could experiment with taking a photograph at 5:30 a.m. and then what do we say, 8:30 p.m. and 12 p.m. This is just sitting in your house, right? You just tell yourself, okay, the first thing, right when I'm going to get up early, when I go for my jog or have my morning coffee, I'm going to take a picture of out the window by the kitchen sink. And then at noon, when I'm making myself lunch, I'm going to take another picture out the window. And then right before, well, not right before bed, unless you go to bed really early, you take the same photo, right? So then you have this really simple progression of time. You could do the same sort of thing like assembling IKEA furniture, right? You come home and you have a box, everything looks nice and organized. The next photo is all these pieces spread out all over the place. And then the next photo is ideally the finished bookshelf. Or maybe it's, you know, some Homer Simpson contraption that you've managed to organize, right? So what is the final, so you're trying to tell a story in 3 pictures. I did one earlier today. I think we're kind of running out of time, and I haven't had a chance to organize or select those photos. So I'll show you my results on Monday's class. So that gives you some suggestions of possible photos to do. And if you've done all of these, I would encourage you to send your pictures to me on Twitter. So let me just show you here. Oops. So what you're looking at, this is my Twitter stream here. This is I guess this is, it gets a little bit old. I gotta change this. This is, I was on the cover of the newspaper last year, and here's a photo of my daughter and I. But so you just my Twitter is here. Let's just zoom right in. Markowsky Art. You could tag me in your photograph, and then I can give you real-time feedback next class, at the beginning of class, on your photographs. So do you want to take advantage of that? I don't know. I would, but that's my recommendation. So lastly, I think before we wrap up, I want to just ask you, if you don't mind, to like this video. That would, if you've watched all the way through, then you must be getting something out of it, is to please like this video. That'll help with getting the word out, and it'll show up on other people's feeds, and more people will watch it. And the more people that learn about taking better pictures, I think the better world we'll live in. It would be nice to live in a world full of beautiful images. So if you like the video, you can click subscribe, would really help me, and then click the little notification bell so that when you open up YouTube next time, you'll just see a little thing saying, hey, Michael's, don't forget that class you said you were going to do. Well, there's another episode coming up. Are you going to tune in or not, right? So please do that. If you are found it to be of even greater benefit and you would like to leave a small donation, there's information on how to send $1 or $50 through PayPal to my account, and that would be greatly appreciated. It helps support me, and helps it gives me incentive to make more of these videos and to give you all of this content absolutely free. Usually there's a cost to these classes, of course. So having said that, I am just going to peruse any comments here as we... Could you send your yes, you could send your pictures to me as a message on Facebook for sure. So if you my Facebook page is in the description below, so you can click that and it goes to the my Facebook. You send me a message and then I'll find it. You could do it through Instagram. You tag me through Instagram. I don't know what other platforms. I haven't got to the TikTok yet. If there's a way to send me a TikTok, that would be hilarious. I would love to see that. Okay, so gosh, that's we've covered a lot of ground today. You can see that just before we finish, we haven't gotten into any of the buttons or dials here. We're going to start doing that next class. Next class, we jump into the deep end and start using your camera. We're going to take some pictures, so make sure your battery is nice and charged up. Make sure you got an SD card in there that you can, because you've taken the photos off of your camera, right? And you've started to organize your photographs, and maybe you're editing and putting them up on the web. So get your camera ready to go for next class. And how many times this happens, people show up to class and the battery dies 5 minutes in and they just have to sit there like, well, I've got this beautiful paperweight. So make sure you got some juice in the battery. And I think that's it for now. I really appreciate, there's people watching right now, leaving comments, people saying thank you. That really means a lot to me, that you guys are getting something of value out of these classes. And I know it sounds obvious, but if you just watch these videos and you think, oh, it's pretty obvious, I can do all that, absolutely, yep, makes sense. But you do nothing between now and next class, you're gonna get maybe 5% of the value out of all of this. It's slowly gonna evaporate from your mind, and then a month from now, you're like, I took all that class, something about composition. But if you go out, maybe tonight, you go walk your dog, take your camera out with you, you go out tomorrow morning, and you try applying some of these things. You do a few sketches, get your IDs on the page. What is the story you want to tell, right? If you own a small business, you're a real estate agent, or you're knitting hats and putting them on Etsy, you got your own jewelry company, you're whatever, making candles, however you're keeping yourself busy, this is a great time to up your photo game. Start planning, like, what would be the story you'd want to tell? Like, if you were knitting hats and you want to document them and put them onto your Etsy page or Amazon or wherever it's going to go, maybe you have a photograph of a hat. Maybe, just on a blank white space. Then you take a photograph of somebody wearing that hat, the kind of person that you think would wear that hat. Maybe that's yourself, and you take a selfie, or your partner, or you have friends that already own it, and you ask them to send you a photograph. And then maybe another photograph is where you make that hat. Maybe it's your table, and you do what is called a flat lay, which we'll do later on, like from above, and you kind of nicely organize the hat with the sewing needles and your cup of coffee and your journal or sketchbook, whatever. Those kind of things help, you know, people understand the story behind that product, right? Everything, think about next time you go out and buy something, think about the story that was told to convince you to buy that thing, right? Stories are super powerful, and whether you like it or not, you're experiencing and living stories. So take control over those stories. Okay, everybody. I really appreciate this. I could just keep on going for hours, but everybody's got to eat. So we'll see you Monday at 4 o'clock Pacific here, Vancouver, LA time. And if you can't tune in, the videos will be up there on YouTube for you to watch and endlessly and on repeat to your heart's content. Take care, stay safe, wash your hands. Bye-bye. And I got to bring up the title here, which is a little awkward. There we go. See you, everybody.